All right, let's dive in. Today, we're tackling the wild world of real estate.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically, we're dissecting some videos from a guy named Garrett S.
Okay.
He hosts this show called The Real Estate Show, and he's got like 30 years of experience buying and selling properties.
Right.
So we're talking market corrections, institutional investors, and some practical tips you can use to
Right.
figure out what's happening in your own neighborhood.
That's good.
So first things first, is the market really headed for a correction, or is that just hype? Garrett S. points to some pretty convincing evidence,
Yeah.
especially in places like Texas and Florida, where we're already seeing price drops.
Oh, wow. So it's already happening in some places.
That's what he says, yeah.
It's interesting.
But I guess to understand this, we need to think about how real estate cycles actually work.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not just a straight line up.
No, it's not.
It's more like, waves on the ocean.
Okay.
You have periods of growth, and then you have periods of decline.
I see. So it's like a cycle.
Exactly. And Garrett S. actually uses a really great analogy. He says it's like a freight train, not a Ferrari.
Oh, I like that.
So it's slow, it's powerful,
Yeah.
but it's definitely moving.
That's a really good way to think about it.
Yeah, and it reminds me of another point he makes about the lag effect in real estate data.
What do you mean by that?
So even if you're glued to those online listings and you're tracking all the recent sales,
Yeah.
you're actually looking at the past, not the present.
Okay.
So imagine trying to drive using a map that's 3 months old.
Oh, wow.
That's
Yeah.
kind of what you're doing if you're only looking at those public sales figures.
Interesting.
To really know where the market's going,
Yeah.
you have to look beyond those lagging indicators.
So what should we be looking at then?
Well, Garrett S. mentions things like inventory levels and marketing times and seller incentives, but to be honest, some of that stuff went right over my head.
Yeah, I can see how that could be confusing.
Yeah, so can you break it down for us?
Sure.
What's this whole market velocity thing?
Okay, so velocity is basically how fast homes are selling in a certain market.
Okay.
So think of it like a river.
All right.
A fast-moving river means things are selling quickly.
Strong market.
Exactly. And a slow-moving river,
Yeah.
well,
Things are just kind of sitting there.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So if we're seeing more for sale signs
Right.
and houses are staying on the market longer,
Mm-hmm.
that's a sign that the river's slowing down.
Yep, that's one way to look at it.
Okay, and what about those seller incentives he keeps talking about, like rate buy-downs and all that?
Ah, yes, the art of sweetening the deal.
So what is a rate buy-down?
It basically means the seller's paying to lower the buyer's interest rate for a certain amount of time.
Oh, so they're kind of like helping the buyer out a little bit.
Exactly. They still get their asking price,
Yeah,
but they're making it more appealing for the buyer.
that's clever, but it also sounds a little sneaky, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be aware of those tactics.
Right, because it could make the market seem stronger than it actually is.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's important to look beyond the surface.
Okay, so we've got this freight train slowing down.
Right.
Sellers are getting creative.
Yeah.
But what's really driving the shift in the first place?
Well, Garrett S. is really hammering home this point about interest rates.
Right.
He says they're playing a huge role in this whole thing.
Yeah, but how does that work? I know rates have gone up,
Mhm.
but how does that translate into lower home prices?
Okay, so think of it this way. Higher interest rates mean higher mortgage payments for buyers.
Right.
And when those monthly payments get too high, fewer people can qualify for a loan.
Makes sense.
So you have fewer buyers competing for homes.
And that means?
Prices go down.
Bingo!
It's just classic supply and demand.
Okay, I get it.
And here's where it gets really interesting for anyone thinking about buying a home right now.
Oh, yeah.
Even though the Fed is saying rates might drop in the future,
Right.
lenders might not follow suit immediately.
So even if rates start to come down, it might take a while for those lower rates to actually show up in those mortgage offers.
That's a possibility, yeah,
Okay, so interest rates are a big deal. Got it.
definitely.
But Garrett S. also talks about this other force in the market, those institutional investors.
Oh, yeah, those guys.
He drops this mind-blowing stat. Blackstone is the largest homeowner in the country.
Really?
They own 750,000 homes.
That's crazy.
I know, it's insane.
Wow, okay, but why does that matter?
Well, because institutional investors with all their money and their fancy data analysis,
Yeah.
they're often considered the smart money.
Right, they're the ones who are supposed to know what's going on.
Exactly. They have the resources to see those market trends before the rest of us do.
So what happens when the smart money starts doing something different?
That's a good question. And it's something Garrett S. is warning us about. He says these big players are starting to become net sellers.
Oh, so they're pulling back.
Yeah,
Oh.
and that could have a ripple effect on the whole market.
That's something to keep an eye on, for sure.
Okay, so we've got rising interest rates,
Right.
institutional investors hitting the brakes,
Yep.
and just a whole lot of uncertainty about what's going to happen next.
Sounds a bit like a storm brewing.
It kind of does, yeah.
Okay, so where do we go from here?
Well, let's shift gears for a minute.
Okay.
And talk about something a little more personal.
Right.
Because Garrett S. doesn't just focus on the big picture stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He also gets into the nitty-gritty of home ownership.
What do you mean?
He talks about all those expenses beyond just the mortgage payment.
Oh, right, the hidden costs.
Exactly. Things like property taxes, insurance, maintenance, all those little surprises that can really add up.
Yeah, it's easy to forget about those when you're caught up in the excitement of buying a house.
It is. And it's like the real estate version of those baggage fees you get hit with at the airport.
Huh, that's a good analogy.
So he really stresses the importance of understanding the true cost of owning a home.
Yeah, it's not just about that monthly mortgage payment.
Nope. And that's something we'll dig into more in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good. I'm ready for more.
Me too. We're just getting started.
You know, it's really fascinating how Garrett S. kind of brings all these different pieces of the real estate puzzle together.
Yeah.
Like interest rates and, investor behavior and all those hidden costs. It's like he's showing us how they all connect,
A big tapestry.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the things that he keeps coming back to in his videos is this idea that real estate is cyclical.
Right. It's not just about, finding a house you like.
Right.
It's about understanding these like waves of, growth and decline.
Ups and downs.
Yeah. And knowing like where we are in that cycle.
So are we at the top of the wave or are we headed for a wipeout?
Exactly. And I think that's what he's trying to help us figure out.
So let's say I'm thinking about buying a house right now. What are some things I should be thinking about given, everything we've talked about?
Well, I think the first thing is to be really honest with yourself about your financial situation.
Okay.
And what your goals are.
Mm-hmm.
Can you handle these higher interest rates?
Mm-hmm.
What's your risk tolerance if the market does correct?
Right.
And are you prepared for those additional costs,
Mm-hmm.
Beyond the mortgage payment?
The property taxes and all that.
Exactly. Because it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of buying a house
It is.
and forget about those things.
Yeah, for sure. And Garrett S. really stresses that real estate is a long game, right?
Absolutely.
It's not about, trying to time the market perfectly
Right.
or flip a house for a quick profit.
It's about making, smart decisions for the long term.
Okay, so I've got my finances figured out.
Okay.
I'm ready to play the long game.
Right.
But how do I actually start decoding these local market trends that he talks about?
Well, he gives some really practical advice.
Okay.
Remember those for sale signs we were talking about?
Yeah.
Like, how many are you seeing in the neighborhoods you're interested in?
Okay, so if there's a ton of for sale signs, that could be a sign that things are slowing down.
Yeah, potentially.
What else should I be looking for?
How long are those houses sitting on the market?
Right. Are they selling like hotcakes or are they just sitting there?
Exactly. And don't forget about those seller incentives.
Are they offering to pay closing costs or something?
Yeah, things like that. Or upgrades to the property.
So if they're practically begging people to buy their house, that's a sign that maybe the market's not so hot.
Yeah, it could be a sign that things are shifting.
Interesting. Okay. So we've talked about these big picture trends, seller motivations, hidden costs.
Mm-hmm.
But let's circle back to that master wealth building move
Oh, yeah.
that Garrett S. keeps teasing. I want to know what that is.
He calls it the vintage move.
Okay.
And it really comes down to understanding those real estate cycles we talked about.
The waves.
Yeah. So imagine you buy a property at a reasonable price during a market downturn, and then you ride that wave up as the market improves, making improvements to the property along the way.
Adding value.
Exactly. And then when the market's peaking, you sell.
Okay, so I've made a nice profit. What happens next?
Then you take that equity you've built up and you wait.
Wait for what? The market to crash?
Not necessarily crash, but for that next downturn in the cycle.
Okay.
And then when prices start to dip, you buy again.
So it's like you're buying low and selling high.
Exactly like a real estate tango.
One step back, two steps forward.
Yeah. It takes patience, though.
For sure. And a strong stomach for those market swings.
Definitely. But Garrett S. says if you're willing to play the long game, it can be really rewarding.
Okay, so basically this master move is all about recognizing those cycles and knowing when to buy and when to sell.
Yeah, but remember, he also says real estate is local.
Right.
So even if the national market is correcting, your area might be doing something totally different.
So even if everyone's saying the market's crashing, my little corner of the world could be booming.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to understand your local market.
So it's not enough to just follow those national trends.
Right. You have to do your research.
Be a real estate detective.
Yeah. Talk to local agents, go to open houses, really get a feel for what's happening in your area.
It's like becoming a real estate anthropologist.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've talked about, the potential downsides of the market, the possibility of a correction,
Mm-hmm.
the risks of buying at the wrong time.
Right.
But there are also opportunities, right?
Absolutely. Even in a down market, there are always deals to be found.
And for people who are, ready to buy and they've got that long-term perspective,
Yeah.
a market correction could be a good thing.
It could be a great time to buy.
Because prices are lower, there's less competition.
Exactly. You might be able to get a better deal.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
Nope. It's about being informed and understanding the risks and being strategic.
And that's where I think Garrett S.'s insights are so helpful. He's not just telling you what's happening, he's giving you the tools to navigate the market no matter what it does.
I completely agree.
So, as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with a couple questions to think about.
Okay.
What are some of those unique factors that could affect your local market?
Good question.
What are your personal financial goals?
Yeah.
And how does real estate fit into those goals?
These are all things to consider as you're exploring the real estate world.
For sure, knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
One thing that really sticks with me from all this is how much Garrett S. emphasizes, the human side of real estate.
Yeah, he's not just talking about, numbers and data.
Right. It's about people.
Yeah, their motivations, their fears, all that stuff.
Like he's encouraging us to be real estate detectives.
That's a good way to put it.
You got to go out there and talk to real estate agents who really know the area.
Yeah, get the inside scoop.
Find some good contractors who can give you realistic estimates.
Right, because those online estimates can be way off sometimes.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And even just talk to your neighbors,
Get a feel for the neighborhood.
Exactly. And remember what he said about those online platforms like Zillow?
Yeah,
They can be super helpful, but
they're not the whole story.
right, you can't replace actually going and seeing a property in person.
You got to get a feel for it yourself.
Walk through it, get a sense of the layout, the light.
Yeah, see if it feels right.
And he really pushes back against this idea that your house isn't an investment.
Yeah, he makes a good point.
I mean, for most people, their home is their biggest asset.
It is. You got to treat it like one.
Right, so how do we do that? What are some practical things we can do to protect our investment?
Well, I think it starts with really understanding those costs we talked about earlier.
Property taxes, insurance, all that.
Yeah, and those unexpected repairs that always seem to pop up.
Don't remind me.
You got to factor those into your budget.
Make sure you're not overextending yourself.
Exactly. And it's not just about maintaining your property.
Right.
It's also about adding value.
So upgrading the kitchen or something?
Yeah, or finishing the basement, adding a deck, things like that.
So I can enjoy it now and it'll be worth more later.
Exactly.
It's like a win-win.
And that kind of brings us back to that vintage move.
That master wealth building move.
Yeah, it's about knowing when to buy and when to sell.
Riding those market waves.
And having the patience to wait for the right moment.
That's the hard part.
It is. It's not easy.
So to wrap this all up, I think the biggest takeaway is, knowledge is power.
Definitely.
The more you know about real estate, the better decisions you can make.
And don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, there are so many resources out there.
Talk to experts. Get advice.
Tap into that collective wisdom.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, it's about finding that perfect place.
A place to call home.
A place where you can, put down roots and build a future.
And even though the journey might be a little bumpy sometimes,
It can be.
the rewards are definitely worth it.
I think so.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into real estate.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We hope you learned something new and maybe had a little fun along the way.
Definitely.
And remember, stay curious, stay informed, and happy house hunting.
Best of luck out there.